1917.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA, Beaverton, a suburb of Portland. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique and one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we'll be talking about reflections on the Russian Revolution of 1917 because it's some sort of an anniversary. And my guest this evening is Jimmy Moglia, who will enlighten us about the reflections on that revolution. Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you again for coming on. And you've been on this show maybe 7 or 8 times through the years.
I did not count, but it sounds about right.
Yeah, because you're so blasted interesting.
Well, as you say, everybody is an interesting person. So in that sense, I will accept the compliment, but not in any other sense.
And yet, each time I have you back on again, I'm always aware, I'm expecting something new, some new flavor or something coming from you, because it seems like your mind is always active, and your writings and your books and all that kind of stuff, it shows what a fine mind you have. And when I ask you about specific aspects of your intelligence, you always dance around and refuse to admit that you're brilliant.
Yes, I refuse to admit it.
Good to see you again.
And, thank you.
As you know, we'll follow the usual format. And the first half, we'll talk a little more about you. And there'll be some people who are watching this show who haven't seen you before. So we'll keep that in mind. I'll let you abbreviate somewhat of your personal stuff, but not too much, please.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that this sounds like a repetition, even for your technical.
To you it does. Yeah.
Anyway, I will be as concise as possible.
Yeah.
I was born in Italy a long time ago, and I don't care to count the years. And I grew up there, and I went to school there. And
in Italy.
In Italy.
Mm-hmm.
As I think I said before, it almost sounds like the formula. I studied Greek for 5 years and Latin for 8. And
God,
when I,
no wonder you're so screwed. I mean, it's so brilliant.
No, screwed up is not an incorrect description, because when I finished, I attempted to get a job, and I found that employers were very uninterested in dead languages. So I had to go to the university. I took a degree in engineering. And after that, I was employed by a large corporation, which is no longer a large corporation, but it was a company were leaders at the time. I became their international marketing manager. I worked for 5 years in Europe and the Middle East and Africa.
Europe and the Middle East, and which countries in that area?
There's a good number. If I list them all, we will finish the show before the list is over.
Cancel that question.
But... and then I came back. Actually, I should have said that my first job, I was actually a musician. My first job was a musician, so I traveled the world a little bit before getting a little bit more serious, not dramatically more serious. And then when I finished studying. And then after my stint, or period of time spent in Europe, in the island of Guernsey, which was the headquarters of the company, I moved back here and was interested in doing something else. In a moment of which I can only describe as madness, I started my own company, computer company, which I founded, started, directed, whatever you want to call it, for over 20 years. Then I stopped to become a writer, which is a very dangerous proposition to make, because anybody who writes a letter is automatically a writer. So what distinguishes a letter writer from anyone else who uses the pen or the keyboard to express himself? Well, I have my major, which is a very strong adjective to which I probably would object if somebody used it towards me. But anyway, my major works are two dictionaries. One is a Shakespearean dictionary that has become somewhat of a, in a very small world, pretty reasonably well known. It's a very large dictionary, which is unique in its format.
How big is it?
It's 1,400 pages in a small font.
I forgot, 1,400!
But the number of the pages is not really the most relevant part of it. It's
Sure.
the fact that it is probably the most useful dictionary to locate the appropriate quotation for the whatever situation may want to use it in. So for anyone who is
Based
going
on
to
the
school,
great bard.
based on the great bard. Then the other, based on that, the government, say the government, not the governor, although I spoke with him, but not the governor of Tuscany, but the environment, they suggested that they commissioned me to write the same dictionary for Dante's Divine Comedy, which was done, published, printed, is online, and I presented it. I also wrote a counter history of the United States in Italian, and my latest work of interest really is, sounds very pompous to say, but it is, I strongly maintain that education or learning will be greatly improved by the introduction of aesthetics in the method of learning. And as you know, I produce here on the channel, on this channel.
Are you a producer here at TBC
Yes,
TV? Yes.
I produce a series now, which is at the 51st episode, a series of called
51st.
historical sketches, and one of the sketches has to do with the history of memory, and in order to introduce the concept. But the idea of aesthetics in education consists of, very simply, to translate awkward concept or words to remember or understand in images, and this is done very easy today with the computers. So for every in the specific case of Shakespearean or any other poet quotation, which I like to remember if not else, because when I'm going with my bicycle I have to remember the quote. Anyway, the idea is to translate the quotation, to remember, into a painting. It becomes a painting, a collection of images, and I call that a mnemonic frame. So I've written some kind of instructions on how to do that. And by doing that, all of a sudden the memory blooms into capabilities that are, if without the system, would be unthinkable or unheard of. So I remember literally hundreds of quotations, but not because of good memory, but because by converting, the mind being used to convert words into images, and the images being assembled in the mnemonic frames that I have produced, makes it very easy for the mind to remember. In fact, anecdote.
So the average person is capable of doing what you're talking
absolutely,
about?
Yes. In fact, an anecdote, because it happened less than a week ago.
Sure.
One morning I woke up because I had a nightmare. I had a nightmare. It doesn't matter the nightmare, but at the end of the nightmare, I remember that there was a quote. This is perfect. It applies to it, but I could not remember it, and I woke up. As I woke up, I said, "Oh yeah, of course, the mnemonic frame." I could not remember in the nightmare because I did not have. Well, dreaming, I wasn't thinking of the mnemonic frame. Mm-hmm. That's so. That's just one of my last things one of the things I do at the moment.
So do you have an instruction or some sort of way ordinary people can appreciate what you're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. It's very simple, because memory has been undervalued, despised, and put in the corner only in the last 80, 90, 100 years, but until the 1700, before Leibniz and before Leibniz and Descartes and Bacon before. But anyway, before these big guys of the 1700, it was taught as an indispensable tool for any education.
Memory was taught.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually then came the idea, I will not go through it because people may go through my site and look at the movie, but video, but it became, it started to be devalued as being mnemonic, means something you do not understand when you repeat by rote, which is true. But the idea is not to repeat by rote, but to associate concepts, ideas with images which are individually chosen by by anyone, everyone, but as fitting their own personality, their own psychology.
But this is personal. The image that I have.
Yes. See, today, if you put a word on the internet, on any search engine, you come up with hundreds of images related to that word. Okay. And in my research for what I've done, because I found that different persons select different images.
Sure.
So therefore that particular image, even if not a perfect rendition of the actual concept, is sufficiently close enough to the psychology of the person to make it easy for him to recollect or to connect the word for the image. And if he doesn't remember the word, he will remember more easily the image.
What's the purpose of what you're talking about?
There are several.
Uh-huh.
The first one is because if I like poetry in general, and I like good expressions in general.
Of course.
So not necessarily poetry. So if I want to remember a good expression, I make a mnemonic frame out of it, and so or a poem or a line, and that comes very easy to remember. So that is one. The second one is that, as you know, everybody today uses whatever PowerPoint or one of these presentation systems. But it is also good to be able to make a presentation without having to refer either to lines or to refer to a screen. Oratory, without being an orator, but without presentation, after all, if one presents, he's speaking as an orator, with a small o, but he's still with a lowercase o, but he's still an orator. So having the ability the system enables a person of average memory to be able to give a presentation without having to rely on notes. We're talking about an hour, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, not a complete course. But
you can occupy 3/4 of an hour using the system you're talking about without
absolutely,
any notes
yes.
Or computer to look at?
Yes.
Phenomenal.
No, it's not phenomenal, because once you see it's done, it's I would say logical, without referring to Dr. Spock.
But now we're talking about it as it's abstract, because I'd like to see what you're talking about and have you demonstrate it,
yes.
but we can't do that.
No, we cannot do that, but you asked me what I was doing, and to end the long tale, it's the fact that we've been involved in. I've been involved for quite a while. I've been trying to. I shouldn't say this, to present it to the big guys, you know.
Sure.
But universities, my perception is that universities are a bit of oligarchies. You know, so if everywhere is an oligarchy. But if you are on the outside and if you try to present people something new, this is what the guy is halfway between Don Quixote and I don't know, someone else, which has odd ideas. So I really don't mind. But I've made sufficient research with people to find out that it works. So,
are you too far out?
Well, I've always been far out and far off. But
yeah.
That's one of my. I don't mind to claim that.
I'm going to switch over now. Something strange about you. You're so unique in your mental process and how you talk about things. Religion. What kind of a religion have you ended up with?
Well, we go through life through various stages. No? I was born a Roman Catholic. I became an agnostic, and I essentially I don't have any religion. However, I do respect all the religions, and because you asked me a pointed question, I think that if we looked at the world today as it develops, or as we can see in the various states, particularly even Russia, which switched from a completely atheistic government or a mode of thought to the recent government, from the intellectual point of view, there is nothing wrong in using, in my view, religion, at least some religions,
Sure.
the Orthodox religion as a foundation for spiritual thought. So even if I do not subscribe to it, I respect it.
What is spiritual thought, Jimmy? Spiritual thought, what is that?
Okay, there are material thought, if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
And there are spiritual thought which can be condensed or summarized in saying, what happens after I'm gone? Will I go to, which would be, well, actually, it's almost cogent with what we're talking about, the Lutheran Revolution. The Lutheran Revolution started because there were people who were selling indulgences, what happened to me after death. So if you give me so many dinars or whatever, you give me currency, I will print you this indulgence and will give you so many years off or whatever, off the purgatory or whatever. So that is spiritual thought, meaning the ideas, the concepts, the words that we use to describe the world where we are not, where we never were and never will be again. So that is spiritual thought, as far as related to the question as you asked it of me.
Okay, your turn. Yeah. Yeah, political persuasion.
None.
None.
It would be a complete loss.
How
as
can
a
that
politician.
be? You've got to have political persuasion. Or you're left or right or what?
I used to consider myself a moderate socialist because of the socialist, not so much in terms of party, but in terms of.
Of course.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the current lay of the intellectual land or the mental land is such that the left has become a right and the right has become a left by natural evolution. So it would be even more difficult for me today to describe myself as belonging to any political persuasion.
What kind of persuasion would you say that you are, if not political?
Well, I think you are a humanist. I would say
Yes.
that humanism captures pretty well the set of parameters that most people would adhere to or would be glad would participate in terms of political matters. But since we're talking about the Russian Revolution, every now and then
second half. That's the main part of the program, of course.
Every now and then somebody says we need a revolution, and there's nice things to say, but unfortunately revolutions never turn up the way they were intended to be, because, as you well know, even democracy turns up as a collection of oligarchies, and so democracy inevitably turns into an oligarchy. It doesn't matter whether it is a democracy of the left, of the right, etc. It's almost inevitable. And when an oligarchy group, oligarchies, or you can call them oligarchies, you can call them cliques or whatever, a restricted group of people that form a kind of wall against everybody on the outside. I just noticed this with the university when I attempted to talk to them about my programs. This is just one example of many. But so as such, when people think we live in a democracy, when we say we live in a democracy, we do because the government is called democratic. But it's essentially a collection of oligarchies, partly because it cannot be done any other way, because you cannot have everybody voting on everything, but partly because it's the nature of the system. Democracy is the rule of the oligarchs.
What's an oligarch?
Oligarchs, a Greek word. You see, every now and then my uselessness comes to it. Is the rule by the few.
Yes, of course.
And it's an oligarch. So the power of the few that control everything else. And if you are outside of this clique or this oligarchy, you make, as far as an individual, you may count. You may count as a number, but as far as influence is none. You have no influence whatsoever. None.
You have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend?
I have a cat, which doesn't. I have 2 sons and a cat.
Which do you prefer?
Well, that's this one of the incommensurability comes into play. But no, I live with a cat. I have 2 sons. One works here, and the other one works in Berlin. He's part of a marketing company, deals with internet, all this stuff, and I'm here.
Has he inherited your mental capacity, for want of a
I
better
don't have
word?
any mental capacity. No.
Is he easy to talk to than
yes.
than you?
Well, yes, definitely. But I'm easy to talk to. But no, they're good boys. We'll be hopefully we'll be back for Christmas, and this has been there for over 3 years now. He likes Berlin, and which I understand. And
Does he speak German?
Oh yes, it's a German company, completely German company. He was studied in Germany because he likes German as a language, so he speaks it well.
Does he have kids?
No, they have both my sons have girlfriends but no kids, and they're not married.
How about your cat? Does your cat have a mate?
Probably she would, but she's quite independent like me, so. So.
You probably are a good pair, you and your cat. What's his name?
Chavette. Her name is Chavette because.
Why did you choose a name like that?
Because we thought that the son who's now in Berlin found her as a feral cat. It was just a very kitten, so we thought she was a girl. Though we thought she was a boy, so we wanted to call her Chavez, and we got 2, and the other one we're going to be Hugo Chavez, but.
And you're apolitical?
But then it turned out that she was a girl, so we called her Chavette.
Yeah. And how old is she?
7. She's 7 years old.
Is she aging well?
So far, touching wood, yes. She's very, very frisky. She has a very good sense of humor too.
Does she let
which is
you?
what I like in cats.
Does she let you see into her? Is there a communication between you and her that's rather unique?
Everybody has a unique communication with his cat or
I'm
his
talking
pet.
about you and your cat, not everybody.
Yes, because.
Give me an illustration, please.
Excuse me?
Give me an illustration of this special
of course.
communication
For example,
between you and Chivette.
I'll give an example.
Please.
Because cats are very ceremonial as an animal. So. She can get in and out of the house during the day through the garage door, and the garage door then gets to the point where there is an opening just special for the cat.
Sure.
But in the evening I want to have in because there are other animals. So I say, let's go do the ceremony, and I call the ceremony go and closing the garage door. I call it the ceremony is like the closing the gates of the Tower of London, where you have the guard that says, "Who is there? The keys? Whose keys? The Queen's keys." So let's go and do this ceremony. When she hears that, she darts all the way down to the stairs, much faster than I am. The can I do? And then she stops in front of the door, which had to be closed. She's waiting for me to close. She's waiting for me to pick her up. So I bring her upstairs while she's purring. So that's one example of this sort of type of communication. I did not ask her to do that, but she decided that it was a good thing to do every night. So.
Do you talk to her in English?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I haven't experimented with any other language.
Yeah. So I think about a little story of mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Kathmandu, too, was the name of my cat I want to tell you the story about.
Mm-hmm.
My godmother, also a sister, and my adopted mother, when I was in my teens, finally passed away. Oh, maybe 15 years ago. And we went to the ceremony and the burial and the graveyard and that sort of a thing, because she was Catholic, still Catholic. And I came home and I let Kathmandu into the house because he'd been in the backyard. And I laid on my back in the bed in the sunroom, and the sun was coming in beautifully, beautiful afternoon in Ussr, California. And Kathmandu climbed up on the bed like he usually does, and then he liked to lay on my chest, and with his nose right next to my chin, and I looked down at him like that. And suddenly, out of the blue, an avalanche occurred, or a blizzard or something, and the sound came out of me, and a burst in pain, and the tears just flooded out of my eyes. Delayed grieving and pain and loss.
Yes.
It happened suddenly. I don't know where it came. I was aware it was going on, but what is this? And at the same time, I felt Kathmandu with his little paws trying to get into my chest.
Yeah.
He'd never done that before. And I looked down at him, and he was looking at me, no facial expression, but then we communicated, and I knew that he knew I was hurting.
He was hurting. Yeah. All the
Jesus, I never experienced that before, and never since. That's what I mean about a special communication.
No, there are special communication.
Interspecies.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Can you top
Dogs
that?
too. No, I think I cannot. But if the conversation had been about cats, I could continue for a long time.
I
have
know you
mother
could
episodes.
anything. So let me ask you one or two more questions
Sure.
before we go into the main part of the show. And I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. Persons alive today are gone that you particularly admired and look up to. You're limited only to 4 or 5 because you can go on for probably 30 or so.
Well, of the gun, I literally like Albert Schweitzer. Okay. Who was one who said that God should be thanked for having given us music and cats. You know, he was also clever. And
He did say that.
yeah, she said. And the other one is the still alive, the ex-president Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, whom I admired tremendously. I think.
Why? Why Jimmy Carter?
Well, there are some practical, empirical reasons, and there are some ideological reasons.
Sure.
The empirical reasons is the only president of this country in the last probably 100 years, during whose presidency there were no bombs launched, no missile launched, no war declared, and so that is and no country invaded, which is pretty good.
Was that fate, or was it something that was
No, I
about
think
Jimmy Carter?
it was him. It was him.
Spiritual?
He was spiritual. He is a very cogent with his ideas. He is a religious person in the way that I think religion should be handled, in the best way that I think religion expresses itself in an individual. And so he was very strict on, not strict, but very adhering, consistent in his beliefs. And that's why reason the powers that be, or this deep state, as we call them for concision, the deep state wanted to get him out of after the first president. Had he remained, I think it would have a very different America.
Oh, Jimmy, we're going to have to stop now so we can have time for the Russian Revolution.
Yes, or the Lutheran Revolution. There are two revolutions this month that the anniversaries of. So.
All right, so let's take a break, Mr. E, before you yell at me. Okay, we're back. And thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Jimmy Moglia, and like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about tonight and talk about unique individuals. Jimmy Moglia is a unique individual, and I love him, all right? And we'll be talking now in the second half of the show about reflections on the Russian Revolution of 1917. And Jimmy just reminded me there's another anniversary that we'll be talking about. So let's go on with the second part of the show. And we have some prompting questions that I asked Jimmy to send me to help with the discussion, because we tend to go wandering off into the wild blue yonder sometimes, so we want to be some sort of control.
It's better to have more to say than less to say, although there are limits.
You should let him go free flow. We got 6 hours with Jimmy, yeah. And I admire you so much. All right. Communism was established for the first time as a political and cultural system 100 years ago. The deep state and other forces keep telling us that it is dead. What is some evidence that the contrary exists? What is the evidence that the contrary exists? Communism is not dead, huh?
The idea, the communism may be dead officially, but the idea of egalitarianism is not dead. And the reason why people say that don't use the word communism because the propaganda has been so strong that even if you say communism, every sort of negative connotation is assigned to the word. So
you should say Stalinism would be a better.
I would disagree.
Please go on. I don't want to interrupt you anymore.
No. I would disagree because you see, even Stalin is an individual like anyone else. We go through stages. So the beginning of Stalinism was, quote unquote, manifestly bad by today's standard because of the way that the revolution developed. Yeah. But at the end of the war, at the end of World War II, things began to change quite consistently in Russia. Mm-hmm. So even the last years of Stalin were not as bad as portrayed. Plus, because I've prepared for the series, I have 5 episodes on the life of Stalin. There were some aspects of this that were they put me in a different light than what is normally necessary.
I'll interrupt you. Say a few words about this 5 episodes of
the life of Stalin.
Yes.
So it's there all online if you go on my website. But now we probably will have time, but I'll give you just a bit of episode because people associate Stalin with a monster, a rule. He was a very cultured person. He was from Georgia, and he was an expert in the Georgian languages, very in the Caucasian languages, are very complicated languages just by the way of writing. You don't even know that it is Georgian, but it's very complicated. So I'll give you a brief anecdote. Because in Russia, due to communism, but also to the structure of the country and the mode of thought, which would bring us to a different, longer conversation that we can hear. There is a very bureaucratic handling of everything, which is not only after the revolution, even during the Tsarist time, even the 1800s, even the classics always talk about too much bureaucracy. Anyway, for whatever reasons, at one point in the realm of lexicology, which is the study of language, yes, there came about one individual whose name I don't remember. He had certain ideas of his own, which were conflicting with the ideas of this particular expert of the Georgian language, who had written a large dictionary about it, just like Shakespeare. No, just kidding. So, anyway, the bottom line: this particular guy, because he did not belong to the current of thought was made official by the party in terms of lexicology was fired. But there was friends of his, they admired him very much, so they tried to get in contact with Stalin, and it was very difficult. Then through the usual runaround that is possible, sometimes a stroke of luck, the information got to Stalin, and Stalin invited this rejected professor to Moscow, and because he was also very interested in the Georgian language, Stalin did, they started talking, having dinner at 7, and at 5 o'clock in the morning next day they were still there talking about the Georgian language. But then he realized while they were talking that the guy was a brilliant, this particular rejected professor was brilliant. Whereupon at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, Stalin picks up the phone. I still remember the guy of the commissar in Georgia, you know, and his name was Arutinov. So he tells him, "Hey, Arutinov, why did you fire this particular man?" And so the guy was a little bit, you know, he didn't expect a call from Stalin at 1 o'clock in the morning. So he says, well, there was he didn't give a good answer. And so Stalin said, "You were a bit too fast to fire him. I think you didn't do very well." At this point, the other guy, Arutinov, was terrorized, got out of bed or whatever he did. He went to the house of the professor, where the other professor, they had been fired, and said, "He is reinstated as of tomorrow." And so this is one anecdote I could tell you, but more people can look at the program. But the character has been misrepresented. Most of the people, most of the characters are usually, their life is written by the winners write history.
Yes.
So it is in the interest of all the winners to represent the losers as being, the walking representatives of the devil. So there were difficulties, there were strong bad things, but it wasn't all as bad as it had been represented.
How does that relate to the idea that communism is dead and there's a contrary point of view?
First of all...
And then again now, look, we have 10 more questions here,
Sure,
and it's up to you to decide how much time you're going to spend answering, please.
Well, first of all, it's the idea of communism being, as I mentioned, egalitarianism is still very strong. And it's still very important in some countries now. I'm talking about Cuba, for example, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia.
Not shaky anymore with Venezuela.
Yeah, it's shaking, but still, they have elections. They've been elected again, and they were fair elections. So the idea, it is not a communist country, but the idea that they are egalitarian. Now, there is normally also one of the things that have been said is there was an atheist state. And that is true to an extent, but in other places where they technically, Cuba is a Catholic country, you have complete. So there are limits to that. I'm not in favor of communism or for the matter of democracy, because I said before they tend to become oligarchies, but they tend by nature. But what I'm just saying that when you say the communism is dead, is a good thing to say because it helps to make wars in the Middle East and things like this. But the sense of the egalitarianism, which was part of the philosophy, is not dead. I visited the Soviet Union as well during my youth, my first musician experience.
What kind of music do you do?
I think I told you before.
I know. Tell me again.
There's a little bit of madness in me. So I became interested in the United States through. At the time, I was interested in country and Western music. No longer. So I convinced myself that I was able to do it, and so I spent one summer, nothing else but listening to the tape recorder and listening back until I could more or less pass for not an excellent, but at least a passable country and Western musician or a singer.
How interesting!
And so through that, then I found a way to go and play in some of these resorts at the time, which was almost unique. And so I spent quite a bit of time in what is today Ukraine and Crimea, Odessa, and Sochi and Yalta. So I was able to see the life goes on every day. And most people were, it lacked luxury, the glitter that you can find on the Riviera, or the French Riviera or the Italian Riviera or everywhere else. That glitter was lacking. But otherwise, everything was clean and available, and so people seemed smiling and happy, quite happy. So my impression was not what has been portrayed
Yes.
by the propaganda, which I'm not saying that I'm endorsing it. I'm just saying that the impression was very, very different. And also for religions, as you know, there are more than 80 republics even in the current Russian Federation.
Yeah.
So it was just a miracle to keep them together. So they had, and I saw in Moscow there is a building called it was a Ministry of Religions. And what they did, they tried to administer how many mosques there in the countries, how many churches are here, and gradually the movement changed, and so they allowed more freedom to religions because whoever was in charge, they understood that, as I was saying before, religion can be the spiritual foundation for the foundation for spiritual thought, about which you asked me before. So, but anyway, so in this sense, it is not dead. And also another thing that has to be said, when they say the Soviet Union collapsed, as you know, even Vladimir Putin has regretted that it happened, and it happened was essentially a coup d'état, because there was during the only referendum, which was made, I think, in 1992 or whatever it was, the 78% of the people wanted to retain the Soviet Union.
And they privatized all industry or anything that...
They were stolen, essentially. It was, then the mortality rate, the population decrease was really a coup d'état. So the question as far as whether the communist idea is dead, I think that expressed in terms of the reflecting on the events that followed and also were part of the Russian Revolution, it is dead, but the egalitarianism isn't.
How did the deep state play into what you're talking about? Was the deep state responsible for the collapse of the existing system, so we ended up with another Russian mafia system?
Yes, I think so. I think, you mean you're talking about the current state?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I think so, yes. It was, we would have to go to touchy grounds and see you don't have to talk about, because if you do, you appear, it's very...
We got to go for 2 more hours.
No.
We don't have much time.
But in any event, it was a coup d'etat in order to launch neoliberal globalization mission. This invasion of no borders, as you know, and destruction of nationalities and so forth. So I think it was well planned and well executed from the point of view of those who gained from it.
Give us a summary of the good things that, directly or indirectly, can be attributed to the presence of the USSR. You started doing it right now, yeah?
Yes, I have benefited from it myself, you see, because as we may have said this before, but after World War II, Europe was destroyed. The house of my parents lived was bombed out, so we had been in the country, so when we went back to the city, it was tough at best. And yet it was the lowest point that Europe was at the time. So soon after the war there were elections, and of course the communists were very strong. And there was a serious possibility that Italy could have become a communist country. It was difficult to do because you have the Vatican there. So the Vatican, along with the CIA, of course, or whatever the equivalent was at the time, 1948.
So Italy could have become a communist country?
Yes, well, the Americans had already, the CIA had plans in order to disrupt it. They had came up many years later, but they had the plans to counter-revolution, what they did in other countries too, but it doesn't matter.
Yes.
But because it did not become necessary because the Christian Democrats won.
Yes.
And but the lesson had been taken. So what I would, for lack of a better definition, the deep state at the time decided it was important to loosen the purse.
Now, somewhere along the way, you're going to talk a little more about the deep state and what that means. Maybe not now, but I want to be sure we talk about that.
So the powers that are in control of the purse, so they decided to loosen it up quite a bit. So some of the reforms that were carried out after the World War II, in fear of a communist takeover of Italy from the popular base,
A real communist takeover.
was such as to convince the ruling government to pass on these, I would call them, today we would call them populistic reforms, of which I benefited because I went to school for free, even at university level, and they may not be Yale, but university school education in Europe was or is not that bad. So
the administrative system versus the deep state.
No, I'm talking about the professors. They were not maybe. Here professors have some kind of a aura of, I would say, intellectual sainthood, but which they do not deserve. Shouldn't speak based on what the people whom I talk with. But anyway,
Go ahead, please.
It doesn't matter. But and it was serious. So So that was also one, and also have the confidence, or at least the perception, that if you get sick, you don't have to go here. If I guess a good God, I'm going to lose everything because I'm getting sick. So free health care and all these good things. And there were several other initiatives that were taken just to make sure that there would be the drift towards the communist was controlled, notwithstanding the strong, of course, the strong position of the church against
What's the difference between communism and socialism?
Very little, because it's a question of policies and things like this. Communism never existed even in Russia, so it came as socialism. And the theories that they were trying to attempt, they were changed quite quickly, because communism implied just everybody the same, no religion. No, there was change. They realized that it was impossible. Whoever was the thinking group running the system, they decided it was not an appropriate thing to do at the time. So
what would be the ideal system?
there is none. There is no ideal system. There is only, in my opinion, the only, the best that what could approach, and we would be to give a possibility to everyone to express their own opinion and have those opinions heard. Now,
Isn't there a name for that? Create a name for it.
Participative assembly.
Socialism?
I don't know, because with the conversation will be too long. With socialism is concentrated where everybody has the same. No, I think that the web, as everybody says, so it's a platitude now. But everybody gives the possibility. Your program gives a possibility for people to express themselves, and that grain of expression which may hit, or rather may convince a person at least to listen, may instill in his or her mind some ideas that maybe not have before. So with this very generalized, unmeasurable collective participation to the process of thought, this participation is what may in time lead to, I wouldn't say a system, but a form of greater communal participation in the process of government.
Is there something in the human genome that prevents this from occurring in humankind?
No, if not from, I'm an expert in anthropology, so I'm
Neither
not
am
an
I,
expert.
but I'm having fun with it.
But I do not know. I think it's every one of us carries on his virtual shoulders the weight of history. So we cannot go back and say what it happens. Many of us, all of us are different. So every person has its own set of beliefs, some of which he is aware of and some of which he is not aware of.
And a collection of persons, if they come in agreement and have some sort of a...
sorry.
Go ahead.
If gradually this, I would say, hostile, the hostile element which is in each individual, if gradually this hostility is reduced by communal participation and sharing of ideas, this may lead to the conditions where then the instrument of government may reflect this soothing or this mellowing.
To dream the impossible dream, you're talking about the hostility. Hostility exists in the human genome.
I am saying that, but today we're not still killing each other as in some other times.
Not?
Some, but statistically. what I'm saying that we drifted. If I may, you asked me a question of what would be, and I'm saying that without lacking, I'm not particularly. I don't favor one government versus another, but I'm saying that altogether the participation to the sharing of ideas that the new instrument of communication make possible, may in time lead to a collective frame of mind that would generate a better administrative system, including a little bit more equality.
What would happen to the deep state in that case?
It will remain there, but we're just a bit less deep.
This is crazy. We don't have any more time left, hardly. What else? Shall I ask you another question? Or you have,
Sure, no, that's it.
Why was the dissolution a disaster for the USSR? And I think you've alluded to that a little bit here.
Well, we saw it. There were two things that were bad. Bad for the USSR, of course, because we've just spoke about it. Well, that happens, the theft and the confiscation of everything that was public. But it was also bad for us, because everybody knows about it. So I feel I'm repeating platitudes. But as you know, there was a great deterrent to war for wars. Fortunately, we haven't been affected it. I know, but Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, we're talking about millions of people dead, and that would have not, let alone even Chechnya, because the CIA went to work to then Ukraine and everything else, in order to stir these revolutions, so-called orange revolutions, which is orange bloodbath. But anyway, so that was a very bad effect on the West.
Is the American empire starting its decline?
I don't know, because
I don't know either. But
everybody says that. It depends on how you measure decline. If you measure decline by the wealth of the elite, those people that have trillions and billions, no, it's perfect. So from that point of view, I do not know whether it's declining.
Well, I'm talking
and remember,
about
money is power, and so the greater you have the power, the greater the power, the more difficult it is to change things.
When an empire declines, its power diminishes. So that's what I'm talking about, the declining of the American empire. Its power diminishes when the super rich become less rich, much less rich than they are nowadays, and their influence is much less than it is now.
Except
and
this
something
is
like that.
This I'm not saying that I have any scientific basis for saying this.
I know you know.
But except that today, with all the communication systems available and exchanging whatever money system available, there is a worldwide 1%. There is a worldwide elite, and this elite the allegiance of this elite is not to any particular state but to themselves, and so altogether they can maintain this pseudo-imperial structure to their benefit. So I'm not very sure that it's on decline. From that point of view, from the cultural point of view, absolutely. You can look at the film that come out of Hollywood. I don't watch any, but cultural point of view is not necessarily a decline as we see it.
So a deep state can exist in any particular system or country or culture, whether it be Russia or China or America.
I think so. I think so.
Deep state deep in the background, and their goal is to ensure
their survival.
Beyond survival, more than they need to survive.
Yes.
To enjoy at the expense of the general population. That's the deep state.
I would think so. Yes, but there is nothing dramatic or I would say heretic in saying this. It's always been that way.
When we do a little more research, we're going to get back on again and talk about the deep state some more. There's a lot more, and I can see it.
There's also more. There's also more you cannot say because you're accused of something. So even today, there is a lot
I'm on a lot of lists already, so it doesn't matter for me.
No, but I know some of the views that I developed. It's good not to talk about it. But anyway, the deep state exists, and this, in my view, extends well beyond the borders. And so in this sense, the decline of the American, I'm not the only one, but you're not the only one. But everybody says it. Depends on how you measure. If you measure by Hollywood, it declined a long time ago. If you measure it by, I do not know, by the proliferation of incredible so-called healthcare machine, well, good God, it's impossible. I received a manual with 350 illnesses listed. That it's beyond belief.
Jimmy, we gotta stop. This is just incredible. We should be able to go on for another hour or two, really, without exaggeration. And don't wait so long before you come back on again to talk about whatever you want to talk about, because you're so damn interesting.
You want to tax the patience of your listeners.
So look at that camera and say something to them, some final thought or idea. Your last minute or so to talk to the viewers.
Last minute.
Dear viewers.
Dear viewers, thank you for your patience. I could be worse than I have been so far, and but yes, my suggestion is to become informed. Do not watch the television, the news on television, because it's totally unreliable. That would be a euphemism. Find yourself information on site until hopefully they will assuming, but not given, that freedom of expression will be maintained, because there are forces trying to curb it too. So inform yourselves if you can. I'm sure you do already. Inform yourself more, and I hope that you will get benefit out of it. And watch my, try to look at the historical sketches in my site, yourdailysshakespeare.com.
Thank you very much. Do we have a few minutes for one or two? Oh, I gotta thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed Jimmy as well as much as I did. And we got to have him on for 8th or 9th time, sometime in the not too distant future. I don't know of any other guest I enjoy as much as I do you through the years. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. That's a requirement necessary. It's the end. We'll see you next time.